So we are back reviewing the Book of Boba Fett. We missed episode 4, so we are combining episode 4 and 5, the tales of two bounty hunters and their starships. My name is Cody. Across the internet from me is my co-reviewer, Zach. Just to start it off, generally, Zach, did you like 4? Did you like 5? Were they good? Were they bad? Just your general impressions to get us going here.
They are solid episodes. They're interesting. They get us a little bit more about the plot, about what is potentially going to be happening here towards the end of the Book of Boba Fett. But it's still not a strong series so far. It is still very much just a mess of a lot of things. We don't really know. Like, we kind of have a general idea of where the plot's going, but we don't really know how it's going to get there in a bad way. Usually that suspense of, oh gosh, how are we going to get to the end? How are they going to save the whatever? It's just not there. It's a kind of a mess of a lot of different characters, a lot of backstory that is honestly kind of irrelevant. So yeah, general impressions is, yeah, these are great episodes. They're fun. They're most exciting ones to me. Unfortunately, one of them's not even really a Book of Boba Fett episode, and the other one is the strongest of the Book of Boba Fett episodes. So that kind of says everything about this show right there.
Yeah.
It's just, there's just so much going on that is kind of irrelevant to, I think, honestly, what the fans wanted.
Yeah. I think that these two episodes were both okay, and spoilers ahead, so anybody who's trying to avoid spoilers, this is your spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1, here we go. I actually think, my breakdown of it is, I think that episode 4 and 5 kind of took the same story concept and just copied each other. It is two guys looking for a place to belong, looking for a friend. They find a friend, and in the midst of that, they have to go find a starship that is going to be able to help them in their bounty hunting duties. It is kind of interesting. One's a Boba Fett episode, one's a Mandalorian episode, but essentially they're very similar tales and get to very similar conclusions to where it's like, oh, hey, I need to find somebody to team up with, and they kind of leave you at the same point. I thought that the 5th episode was the best episode of this series. Like, it was the best episode of the series, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Boba Fett other than, like, if you skipped the intro segment where you hear Fennec mention, we need to go find muscle, that's the only way that these two things are attached. Yep. I have somewhat of a cynical view on this show. When we do our full series review, I'll get more into that. But let's start off with episode 4 and just talk about something good that this episode did. To give it some praise, what did this episode execute on a high level?
I will say, I think we finally saw the true Boba Fett. Up until this point, we've been getting backstory and a more tender-hearted Boba Fett, someone who sympathizes with his captors, which is somewhat out of characteristic of what little we knew about Boba Fett before this. So I think we finally got that cold-blooded assassin Boba Fett when he finally gets his ship and he goes and chases down the speeders and blasts that bike gang to pieces.
Yeah.
That was the Boba Fett everyone
Boba Fett,
knows and loves. That felt like Boba Fett. Just kind of cold-blooded, going after the people that he does not like. And so I think we got a snippet of that. Building up to that was cool. His whole relationship with, Fennec was interesting. I don't know if I really liked it all that much. The whole twist of her being kind of a cyborg was cool. Don't know how it really has anything to do with her character in the story, but it was there. But yeah, we got finally a look at the true Boba Fett. And so for me, that was the strongest and the best part of, episode 4. How about you, man?
Yeah, I would say that that's a good element of it. I liked the revenge aspect of this episode. I think that I was really leery coming in when they had the mod parlor scene at the beginning, I was like, what is going on here? Like after the Power Rangers Vespa scene, and then we start this next one off with the mod parlor. I'm like, is this series like trying to be a joke? And I was pretty skeptical, but I came around to it once he got his starship, and once he got it back, he had the revenge. And that's what I wanted this show to be. I wanted this to be Boba Fett's back from the dead, and he's getting revenge. Like, when they teased it in the end of that Mandalorian episode, and they kind of did the flashback in this episode when you see him sitting on that throne, he kills Bib Fortuna. You kind of have a sense that this is gonna be an intense show, right? This is gonna be the Godfather in Tatooine. And up to this point, that's not what we've gotten. We've gotten like this really slow redemptive story, which, don't get me wrong, I love redemptive stories. However, certain characters, I want you to still live in your darkness for a little bit longer. Like, I mean, that sounds terrible, but that's what I wanted from this show. But I know you have some information about Boba Fett's Starship, which has a new name now. Tell me about the Firespray Starship, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft is the ship now, apparently, which I just learned, I'm not even kidding, 20 minutes ago. So this Starship, the reason why I looked this up is because, the episode 4 is basically about him getting his ship. He really wants his ship, and it is a classic ship from Star Wars. It's one of the most unique looking starships in the universe. And so I was like, you know what? I want to see a little bit about this ship. Apparently, if you wanted to go to your local Starship dealer and purchase a craft similar to Boba Fett's, I don't think you could buy the exact one, but if you wanted to buy, the Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft in that area, it's going to cost you 125,650 credits. So I don't know what US dollars, transfers to credits. I don't know how that works, but if you're sitting on a family inheritance, you might be able to transfer that to credits and buy a starship like Boba Fett's. It's got a lot of weapons on it, and we see some of them in Book of Boba Fett.
That's true.
We see the seismic charge, and we see just the standard laser cannons. But this thing's also got concussion missiles. It's got tractor beam projectors.
Wow.
It's got an ion cannon. And it's got twin rotating blaster cannons. So this thing comes fully souped up if you are looking to buy one of these. So we got to see the seismic charge, which I thought was really cool. I thought that was a cool thing with the Sarlacc pit. Although I was a little sad that the Sarlacc most likely died.
It's definitely dead. The seismic charge, though, is one of my favorite sound effects in Star Wars, especially in Attack of the Clones, when Jango Fett is letting those charges go, and there's the complete silence of space, and then you just hear that. It's great. I love that.
It is a cool sound. It's a cool weapon. Unfortunately, it killed one of my favorite things in the Star Wars universe, which is the Sarlacc. It weighs, or the cargo capacity is 40 metric tons, so you can carry a lot of goods in there. Although I don't know where you're putting it all, because it's a weird looking ship. It's like true. A sideways baseball hat. And then it can seat 6 people. Once again, there must be a lot of room in here, because from the shots in Book of Boba Fett, like, they're struggling to get 2 people in there. I didn't even know it could fit 2 people, because the only 2 people who have ever flown the ship are Jango Fett and Boba Fett. So
it's true.
Unless they were anticipating, an assassin co-pilot, I don't know why. They had 2 seats in there. There's a lot of ships in Star Wars. So I'm like, why did they put 2 seats in there? Or 4 seats? Like, the Millennium Falcon conveniently has 4 seats. And then the last thing that I thought was kind of irrelevant, but interesting fact that they decided to put on Wikipedia is it has 2 months of consumables inside the ship. So if Boba Fett ever found himself out in the space with no fuel, he could live for 2 months in his ship. And so I don't know if that comes standard if you were to buy your own Boba Fett ship if it comes with 2 months of consumables. But, you know, there's some facts for you people that were wondering a little bit more about the, I almost called it its old name, but the fire starter thing. I can't remember.
Firespray Starship. I'll call it by its old name. It used to be called the Slave One. And that was said by Disney. No more. I do have to talk about some weaknesses of this show, and there are a few. I'm going to list a couple, and then I'm going to go in depth on one of them, and then if you want to go more in depth on whether it's one I mentioned or didn't. First of all, fighting stupid droids. I hated that. They're in the kitchen, and he's fighting the droids. Like, I get it. You want your comic relief. You want your family-friendly moments, and I don't know. It just felt so dumb. The other thing I have written down here is that, and this is going to be a criticism in episode 5, is the flashback kind of ended, and you really missed out on a ton of context if you didn't watch The Mandalorian. Like, if you didn't watch The Mandalorian, you didn't see how he got his armor back, you didn't see the incident that it led to, and really where he and Fennec were going, that wasn't discovered either. So then, like, flashback's over, and, you know, they're happy, and they make the deal with the mob bosses and whatever. But my major critique, I'm watching this show, and it has the scene where Chrysanthemum is in the casino thing, and he's getting so mad. Like, he's getting so angry watching those guys gamble. And I'm like, why is he so mad? Like, why is he so angry? I don't understand. Did I miss something in the show? And then this is classic, right? Like, classic show, don't tell, right? And then we get Chrysanthemum's complete backstory through a monologue, and it was like, no, not on a television show.
Yes.
Don't do it. And so I would have loved to, as he's getting angry, quick flashback in the pits, showing him fighting, you know, and then he's getting mad, and then quick flashback, like he's enslaved by these people or whatever. You know, like, they give you this explanation. It's like, that's really interesting, but you didn't show me. And I was a little confused, right? They explain it, but in the moment, I'm like, why is he so mad? Like, what? Did I miss something in the show? Why is he so angry? And then, of course, they have to do, like, major fan service. They have him rip the guy's arms off because, you know, Wookiees rip people's arms out of their sockets. It's an old Star Wars quote. So, anyway, that was my major criticism. I'm like, this scene could have been really good with, like, 10 more minutes in the editing room, you know, and just like shooting a couple more things. And anyway, what about you, man? What do you think was a weakness in the show?
I mean, it really was what you mentioned with the Wookiee.
Okay.
How do you say his name again?
Chrysanthemum?
Chrysanthemum. I have never disliked a scene in a TV show or a movie as much as I disliked that one because of exactly what you said. Because it was just, there was no purpose to that scene other than to give his backstory and for Boba Fett to go, hey, you need a job. Like, that was it. That was the entire purpose of that. And for some reason, we had to show that he's just this angry guy, which we already knew because he worked for the Hutts, which, by the way, the Hutts, I guess, aren't in the picture. So maybe, you know, this in the next 2 episodes, hopefully we'll see if they really were gone for good. But if they are not back by the end of this end of the season, I'm going to be more upset than I am already about this show, because why would you get rid of the 2 most interesting bad guys in the entire show? Anyways, I digress. Yes, that was just, I don't know if it was lazy writing. I don't know if it was we ran out of money. I don't know if it was we didn't have time to shoot more scenes, or we had a deadline and we had to cut that and just, you know, do what we could on the editing floor. I don't know what that was, other than just, it was the cardinal sin of all storytelling, not even just screenwriting. Like, the one thing you're taught when you are a creative writer, or you are in college, or you are in a creative writing class, is, like you said, show, don't tell. People want to be treat your audience smarter than they are. Like, assume that they are intelligent and that if you show them things, they can figure out what you're trying to say. It makes your writing stronger. It makes your characters more dynamic. It makes your plot more interesting. The moment you start monologuing and you start explaining something, your audience tunes out.
Honestly, man, I thought episode 4 was a step in the right direction, but after episode 3, I mean, it's not like you had to do much, right? But one thing we did learn from episode 4, and then we'll transition to 5, is both of these episodes displayed that they can do action sequences well, which makes the speeder scene in episode 3 seem even weirder, right? Like, it's just so strange how bad it is. Like, it's just so far out of left field how bad it is, because all the action up to this point has actually been pretty good outside of that. So I don't know what happened there. And we'll move into episode 5, a Mandalorian episode in the Book of Boba Fett series. And it happened to be probably the best individual episode in this series. However, it's hard to be excited about it because it's not an episode in this series, right? It's an episode of The Mandalorian, which is really good. It's really great. And... I'm not a huge fan from a marketing perspective or a sales perspective that you are selling a show about Boba Fett and then requiring that, hey, your audience, if you didn't watch The Mandalorian, episodes 4 and 5 are going to be kind of lost on you. And I want to ask you about that because I know that you haven't seen all of The Mandalorian. How'd you feel about episode 5 from that perspective?
Lost for most of it, but part of me kept thinking, okay, this is going to tie in pretty quickly to Book of Boba Fett, where I'm watching Book of Boba Fett. It's like, I know just from hearing people and reading on the internet that Boba Fett was teased at the end of Mandalorian, so I know they're tied together in that sense. So I figured that The Mandalorian would show up at some point during the Book of Boba Fett. I just didn't know the entire episode would basically be dedicated to The Mandalorian in literally the middle of the season. And so for me, a lot of it was confusing. But the funny thing is probably more interesting than Boba Fett. Like, just what was going on in the previous 4 episodes. This one had my interest the entire way, and I had no clue who any of these people were. I didn't know the fact that, I mean, I don't want to give too many spoilers for those who didn't watch The Mandalorian like I did. So you find out some information because of this that probably spoiled The Mandalorian a little bit for me, but it's okay because I enjoyed this episode so much. So for me, it was confusing, and I don't know how half the things. I didn't know what they were talking about half the time, but the characters were just interesting enough that it kept me going. So, sadly, it is probably the strongest episode in the Book of Boba Fett, and it has nothing to do with Boba Fett.
Yeah, I agree that it's probably the strongest episode, and we'll probably cover this one a little bit quicker because we're getting pretty long on the video here, but I do want to point out a couple reasons why I think it works so well. First, I think the number one thing is that the characters were just like generally interesting. The performances were better than what we've been getting in the series to this point, right? Like, the Mandalorian feels like a bounty hunter, feels like the type of character you would want Boba Fett to be, and there's kind of this mystery in the story, right, that you get, and you get the Darksaber. But I think ultimately it is him searching for belonging after he's given up Grogu, and that was way more compelling than the search for belonging that Boba Fett had, to be honest. And they did it in one episode. In Book of Boba Fett, it took them the first 3 flashback sequences. So you can tell, you can do good storytelling in a concise manner, which they just haven't displayed up to this point in the Book of Boba Fett, in my opinion. They've kind of elongated a lot of things that are mostly pointless, but I think that's one area where the show was strong. However, I will say that the first half of this episode is awesome. When he goes in Tatooine and he's putting the N1 Starship together, I thought it was like a massive waste of time. Like, we spent 20 minutes watching a ship get put back together that was great. It was great to see one of these things fly again. But 20 minutes full of Star Wars jargon, nonsense language, and comedy that for some people it'll land. For me, it didn't land. And I was just like, oh, so we had like 20 really good minutes and then 5 really good minutes in the second half, but like 15 wasted minutes. And that's kind of, that's just my general take on the episode. Overall, I would say it's pretty good, but I was not a huge fan of the fact that they basically didn't make a Book of Boba Fett episode. And then like the whole putting the ship back together thing, I was like, why? It was so serious. Like, this guy's literally banished from his people. And then, let's make jokes for the next 20 minutes. It's like, what a shift in tone, dude.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it just is kind of a testament to how badly they did not want to make a Book of Boba Fett episode that they were willing to dedicate 15 minutes to Starship building and jokes. Like, that was how much they did not want to make an episode. This was clearly, like you were saying, and I don't want to steal your thunder on this, but you were talking before the podcast, like, your theory is this is, and I agree with it, that this is an episode of The Mandalorian and the directors and writers going, we wanted to do The Mandalorian, you made us do Boba Fett, so here's a Mandalorian episode. We got our way. We'll loosely tie it at the end.
There you go.
Which, if you don't really know what's going on, you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's how they tie together. But that just is like, we don't want to make a Book of Boba Fett episode, so we're going to include 15 minutes of Starship building. And we're not going to really cater to the people that wanted Boba Fett, because let's be honest, the most of the people now that are watching Boba Fett, and me included, and I never even saw Mandalorian, really just want to see The Mandalorian. Like, we just, like, for me, the idea of him, and I've seen the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, I like it. Even after first 2 episodes, I like his story way more than Boba Fett. So this episode, to me, was definitely the most interesting, definitely the best world building. You got a lot of lore that was actually cool and interesting and not really relevant to anything going on, but it made me want to see more of that. And that's hard to say when we've had 4 episodes of Boba Fett, and I'm like, I'm good. I kind of want more of this guy. Like, it's just, it's just kind of a mess. And that's kind of the theme for me with this, is just this show is a mess. And how far it's fallen from my initial thoughts in the first episode that we did, where we thought this was going to be okay. Like, they're going to take care of this franchise. Nope. They decided to do something completely off the rails. So, I mean, what do we expect? It's Star Wars.
I mean, my opinion, like you mentioned, my opinion is I don't think they really wanted to make a Boba Fett show. I might do a side video for that. I'm definitely going to talk about it in our season wrap up. But let's just kind of end it here. Episode 5 was great. It wasn't an episode of the Book of Boba Fett. It was a Mandalorian sneak preview, but it was pretty good other than Starship building. That was good for about 5 minutes. And then, yes, he went on the same run as the pod race. Great, fan service. Yeah. We know what you were doing. We get it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. But overall, it was definitely the best executed, especially the first half of it. And that's what we all wanted Boba Fett to be. But I am not actually going to score these. I'm kind of tired of putting numbers on these things because, sometimes I look at what I scored. I'm like, I should have been lower or I should have been higher. So essentially what I want to do here is just kind of say, from your perspective, I'll start. Do you think the show's trending up or down or plateaued? I would say that the show for me is kind of on a level plane, because I'm just getting the impression that, like you mentioned, I don't think they wanted to make this show. And I hope they save the best for the last 2 episodes, and it would be hilarious if they sneak in another Mandalorian episode.
That would be awesome. That would be really awesome. Yeah, I gotta agree with you, man. The show has kind of plateaued since episode 1, 2. It's just kind of like gone up a little, and then we've just had a lot of exposition, to be honest. Just a lot of explaining and the flashback. I mean, if you wanted to make a flashback, you might as well have just made an entire series of Boba Fett lives with the Tusken Raiders.
Sure.
I mean, at this point, the whole plot of him trying to be the mob boss Godfather character is kind of irrelevant. Like, it's just not even in the episodes. Like, it's not even in the show. It's just kind of a plot tacked on at the end to be like, hey, by the way, there's something happening in the present. This is not all just in the past. And it's like, well, I don't care anymore. Just give me the past if you wanted to show us the past. But trying to do this whole balance, it just doesn't make any sense. So for me, it's plateaued, if not a slight like downhill. I mean, the ball is starting just to get over that like first hill on a roller coaster. And if they don't do something, it's either going to plummet or I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'm just glad after episode 3 that this show isn't just a massive parody. And I even had worries about that at the beginning of episode 4. So, that's a positive, but that's not a great positive. So those are our final thoughts on episodes 4 and 5. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching to this video. If you liked it, be sure to tell your friends, give it a thumbs up, and we will talk to you next time on Parallel Quest. Bye-bye.